Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble. I've got an amazing guest here. I typically record these after I finish the actual interview, and I had a great conversation with one of our Pebble users. I actually put a question out to the community and wanted to speak to somebody who came over from the house side of things and what it's been like, that journey, getting started and getting to the point where he is. And I think a lot of you guys who are maybe on the fence about houses, or maybe are straddling both or whatever it may be, I think you're going to find this quite inspirational to listen to Colin's story. And to be honest, Colin's story isn't just unique to him. I've spoken to so many other house investors who've dabbled and gotten into land and never looked back since. I mean, another one of those was Ray Zhang. I mean, he came on to talk about houses a while ago as well. So nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy this podcast episode. Though I do want to let you know, if you are looking to actually get systemized and you want to talk about processes, and a lot of people say like, yeah, I want to work on the business, not in the business, and you're feeling trapped. You don't know how to do it. You're finding yourself doing everything, wearing so many hats. I run something called the Dirt Hacker Challenge, and it is a 5-day challenge where I work with you on getting completely systemized with your land business. Nothing to do with counties, nothing to do with pricing, but everything to do with building repeatable processes. It's probably one of the most unsexy things you're going to hear about building a business, but it is probably one of the most impactful things you can do for your business to buy yourself back time and actually, be clear on what you want to do with that time. Do you want to scale the business? Whatever it is, whatever your dreams are, you're going to hear how Colin has built and has clarity about his lifestyle. So anyways, feel free to check that out over at dirthackerchallenge.com, or if you have just pebblerei.com, on the bottom of the homepage, you're going to see a bar there. I run this once a month, and it's always great times. 5 days with me, super fun. Nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy this episode here with Colin. Cheers. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I've got my special guest here, Colin. Colin, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jesse. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Actually, I posted a question in our community of Pebble users, and I asked, hey, did anybody go through houses before? I'd love to sort of chat about your journey and what it's been like. And anyways, before we even get there, most people are involved with land, obviously, in this space. So can you give us a little backstory about you and a little bit about how you got into land investing?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a very kind of long and meandering real estate journey over the last 20 years. I'm like 44 years old now. I'm originally from Ireland. I've sold real estate in 12 different countries. And,
wow.
a lot of Eastern Europe, South America, and USA, a lot of travel, saw a lot of fun stuff. This is back in 2004 to 2008. And I pivoted to Florida during the Great Recession, where we needed somewhere where prices were falling. That was a well-known market, which had a very strong currency. Florida was the place at the time, and we sold hundreds of condos on commission to international buyers between 2008 and 2013. All these developers that got caught out with apartment conversions where they got their timings completely wrong and finance for condos dried up. And I know it was a funny time. It was a very different world, and we pivoted to flipping single family homes in 2014.
Okay.
So between 2014 and maybe 2022, I flipped 375 plus single family homes, almost all of which were in the Tampa Bay area, Pasco County. A lot of them were in Pasco County in the Tampa Bay area.
Okay.
And more recently, really in the last 2 years, I started transitioning to flipping land. And I've been flipping land for about 2 years and kind of doing it but only kind of full time this year. I stopped kind of buying houses. I bought my last house to flip back in October of 2022 and sold it about 4 months later for a very small profit because all the margins were tightening. We made a ton of money in 2020, 2021, 2022, and we did all right in the years prior to that while we were growing. But now it's all land, and I kind of just fell into it. I think I just heard someone talking about land on a podcast like this one, and I thought that's exactly what I need. I need to transition away from flipping houses. It's getting too complicated.
Right.
You need too much money. The margins are too skinny, and land has been my savior since.
So let's dive into that. You caught wind of somebody talking about land. You mentioned, that's what you want to do. Something clicked in there. You mentioned a couple of things. Margins were getting slimmer and slimmer. Was it competition? Like, tell us the whys, and what was the final nail in the coffin that said, hey, I'm going to move over to land?
I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. Some of it was personal, and a lot of it was just the market changing dramatically. The personal stuff was in 2020, just at the beginning of the pandemic. I split up with the business partners that I've been working with for 12 years. Wow. So the kind of business model was and that was a kind of a tough transition. I still continued flipping houses on my own after that, using the existing systems and processes that we had in place. But I needed to do something else because I was also, I live in Spain, which I haven't said yet. I live in Madrid, Spain. So I do of this from Europe. Most of that house flipping I did from here. I've lived in Spain for 10 of the last 15 years. I lived in Florida from 2017 to 2021, and I went over there to scale the business, which we did with our business partners. And we went from, I think, 40 flips in 2016 to 95 flips in 2019. So we did really well and rode a wave. It wasn't because we were geniuses. We were riding a wave and scaling up. But my wife is Spanish. We were always going to come back to Spain. So we lived in Tampa, Florida for 4 years, where I learned a lot from being there that I didn't know from being here. But I was splitting with my business partners. I was relocating to the other side of the world. The real estate market margins were tightening. Interest rates were going up. I needed another business to pay the bills. I couldn't get a job in Spain. The wages are rubbish here. I wanted to continue being in the U.S. real estate market, specifically the Florida real estate market. And so I started buying land. I had some skills that were transferable from flipping all those hundreds of houses. Yeah. And I just got into land. I bought my first lot in May of 2021. And I think I sold my first lot in September of 2021 and just kept running at it since then.
Never looked back. And I've got so many questions for you. You mentioned skills are transferable. Tell us about that. What kind of skills did you learn in the housing industry or flipping houses? And when we're talking about flipping houses, were you fix and flipping? Were you wholesaling? What exactly?
We were fix and flipping, and we bought a lot in foreclosure auctions, for example. I used to bid on the online auctions. We bought some wholesalers. Yeah. We bought a lot of old lady nice houses on the MLS, and we'd fix them up with new roofs, ACs, kitchens, bathrooms, floors, landscaping, all that kind of stuff. Wow. So mostly cosmetic rentals, but we weren't like building extensions or anything like that. But we were, transforming a lot of houses from being kind of run down to being really modern, and mostly in kind of lower middle class areas. But in terms of what was transferable, you might think nothing is transferable because you're spinning a ton of plates, coordinating roofers and AC guys and plumbers and all the rest of it. But it was more on the sourcing and the due diligence and the disposition side of things, which is what I focused on, because I wasn't really doing the project management for the houses. I was the guy finding the deals, figuring out what I could resell them for, figuring out, so what could I buy it for now, and how would I package it to resell it. And that kind of stuff was transferable, as well as managing the money, as well as having some systems in place where I could outsource a lot of the $10 an hour tasks about go and find me the maps, find me the zoning, ring them about the setbacks. So there's a lot of that stuff that enabled me to hit the ground running, and maybe I just had more confidence as well from doing so many deals. And I'm a licensed realtor, so having access to the MLS is very useful for running comps, for listing them for sale. And frankly, I found it just refreshingly simple to buy this nice 2-acre unimproved lot for $35,000 that I could resell, doing absolutely nothing a few weeks later or a month or two later for $65,000 or $75,000. I mean, it was literally the same and sometimes much more profits than I was doing a house. I mean, my last two houses, I don't mind telling you, I made $11,000 profit on each of them. I needed $240,000 of capital to make $11,000. I mean, it's a lot of money. Your private money, you're paying interest, you're paying insurance, you're juggling about 7 different plates at any one time. Stuff goes wrong regularly.
Yeah.
And, I made a lot of easy money as well. Don't get me wrong, from 2014 to 2022, made lots of money flipping houses, but land, once you know like 5 or 6 things to kind of check out during your due diligence, it's pretty easy to decide whether it's something you should, try or not.
I mean, you mentioned that it's simple and easy to come over from houses. And I certainly found that. I also have a history with houses as well. If you were to say houses, let's say the difficulty of houses at 100%, managing contractors, managing this and inspecting this and all that kind of stuff versus land, where would land sit on that scale of between, 100 to 0?
I mean, I guess 30. I mean, maybe 3 times easier. I mean, look at it. It's a much lower outlay on capital. I mean, if you want to make 30,000 on land, it's generally not going to cost you much more than 30,000. And often you can just assign it or wholesale it or whatever. There's less competition in land than there is in the single family space. It's more flexible and scalable. Going from flipping 2 houses a month to 10 houses a month, you need a totally different business with a totally different financing machine. You need a lot of different bums on seats. But to go from owning 2 lots to owning 10 lots, I mean, you need another VA. But that's it. It's not a whole lot extra. It's just a few more lines on a spreadsheet.
And for those of you that are listening, a VA is a virtual assistant, which you can hire online, and they're really quite a small cost to the business to have another person in there with you. But man, that's really cool to hear what a difference that you've personally felt. Would you say, I've always wondered this, how much bigger do you think houses is than land? I would put it somewhere around 100x more or more than that. Would you say I'm right?
Yeah, I mean, you probably are. I mean, it's funny. I mean, both house flipping and land flipping are dominated by, let's say, mom and pop businesses. People that are doing a handful of transactions, less than 20 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of big guys that are, you've maybe 5 companies that are building, 20,000 plus houses a year. You've other people that are building big apartment complexes. You've guys that are owning thousands or tens of thousands of acres.
Yeah.
But even though those numbers are huge, they're such a tiny, tiny percentage of the market. They can't even make a dent in the price per acre in most of the counties they're in. So it's totally dominated by mom and pop. So that means there's loads of opportunities for somebody who's just a little bit more efficient or a little bit more aggressive to have a nice business without ever having to get crushed by those big guys the way you might in other industries outside of single family residential or land residential.
And I guess that's the downside and the great thing for land investors is that land is just so unsexy and continues to be unsexy. I know a lot of people that come in and out of it, they kind of, and whereas houses, you can see a lot of results, there's a lot of emotions attached to it, and it's really funny, you put a little bit of effort into land, you really can scale up into a business. And I think for a while, I'll be honest, a lot of us, including myself, we got away running land like not a business. Processes in place, not a lot in place. Now that you can put a little bit of effort, you do have a full on business.
Not a lot of shows on TV about flipping land.
Zero, right? Who cares about dirt?
House transformation. Not that they had any connection to reality of renovating houses either.
But I'm sure reality TV had a lot to do with, the marketing of getting into housing. I mean, now you have Tony Robbins running one of the biggest house investing, conferences out there. Some of these big celebrity people are now running that. So, there's a lot of buzz going in, and I guess there will continue to always be. I want to ask you, what would you say are some of the more bigger misconceptions, or if you had any misconceptions about land when you started when you came from houses? Was there Anything you thought, oh, and then you figured out actually that's not true at all? Anything you came
The,
across like that when you sort of started with land?
I mean, I approached it with a pretty open mind, to
Mm,
be honest with you. I'm very open to learning new things. I'm very open to asking questions. I'm open to
right,
networking with people that are already doing it,
right,
and not being afraid to take some action when I have what looks like a deal. So I didn't have any misconceptions that I was going to be great at it, that I didn't need any help. I mean, I needed lots of help. I needed to outsource a lot of stuff that I couldn't do, whether that's getting the data on who
yep,
owns land in these counties, or what a mailer should look like, or how I even send out 1,000 or 10,000 mailers, or how am I going to leave a voice message with these guys or a text message. I didn't know any of that stuff, because when I
right,
was getting housed, it was all direct through an auction or through a wholesaler. So I had to rethink a lot of things and just approach it just like with an open mindset, with a open to learning. And
yeah,
then I just tried to start it simple, like pick one county to start with,
yeah,
and then pick one, land type, which in my opinion was unimproved
right.
residential land that was
Mm,
priced between 10 and 30,000. That's where I started with my first 5,000 deals. And I thought, let's
wow.
try and get a couple of these going. Let's see if there's a proof of concept that I'm not just, the person on the podcast wasn't just blown smoke. So
Yeah,
I got a couple of deals under contract relatively quickly. And then I thought, well, I mean, let's try it in the county next door. Let's move it up to $80,000 lots.
right.
And there's far less risk, because you're really putting these under contract for, you know, nothing down.
Yeah,
You're leaving yourself loads of room.
yeah,
People are much more like, I mean, if you're trying to buy a house and you're saying I'm paying you nothing down and I'll close in 5 or 6 months,
yeah,
that's not easy to do unless you're like some genius salesperson. And there's some people out there that are. But with
sure.
land, you've some guy in Massachusetts whose dad owned a lot in Florida that he bought in the 80s, and
Yeah,
they're just happy to get an offer and they'll sign it. So now you've got like 3 or 4 months just to figure out if it's even worth spending any money on, or worth finding a buyer for. So the risk is very, very low. You're not, you either you buy a house to renovate or you don't. You can't
right.
just keep researching it. You got to take the plunge, and now you've bought it. And if you got your numbers wrong, you could lose 50 grand. Whereas if you're buying a house for 30 that you think is worth 50 or 60, it's difficult to lose money. Even if you close on it, it's pretty hard to lose money. You might get stuck with it for 5 months and end up
Sure.
selling it for 30 or 35, and you've
Yeah,
learned a lesson on, how to value land, but you're not going to lose your shirt. So it's a much lower risk business, and I love the flexibility of it. You can decide if you're
yeah,
going to make this a $200,000 business, or a $500,000 business, or $1 million business, or a 5 million. You can just literally decide from one year to the next what way you want to do it, and just go that way. It's much more difficult to do that when you're talking about millions and millions of dollars in assets.
yeah. So what have you decided? Where do you want to take your line business?
Well, I mean, probably not the way you think. I've always, like I said, I'm living on the other side of the world. I've got
Yeah,
my wife and kids here.
yeah,
I'm a huge believer in having, freedom of time,
yeah,
freedom of location, as in I
yeah.
can work wherever I want. I
I
can
love
work
that.
whatever hours I want. And obviously freedom of money, so that I can decide not to work if I don't want to for a while. So those are much more important for me, from being tied to a
Yeah.
$10 million business, which I can't get out of, which I need to be chained to my desk for 12 hours a day. I don't want that. I mean, I
Yeah.
possibly could do that, maybe,
Mm,
maybe not,
yeah.
but I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. I prefer to have a small business, and small can still be a couple of million. It's still not
Yeah.
small compared to most folks
Most
out there
people.
that are working a W-2 job. I mean,
Right.
you can have, semi full-time job, a couple of VAs.
Yeah.
My hours are like 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Spanish time. So it's a pretty nice,
Yeah.
timetable that I've got the mornings to myself to do
Yeah.
whatever else I want to do. So
Yeah.
it's more about that. I earn enough money to
Yeah.
live very comfortably in Spain. I earn enough money to slowly build up assets,
Yeah.
and I'm just kind of tipping away and just looking at things that interest me. I might feel, well, I'm going to try owner financing that. So
Right.
I
I
originated a bunch of my own notes, or I'm going to buy someone else's notes. So I
Yeah.
bought a bunch of notes a couple of weeks ago in Arizona. So I just enjoy. There's a lot of stuff you can do with land that
I love it.
you might not originally think of. You can slice it and dice it a lot of different ways. It can be more interesting than you think. But if you have
Yeah.
the attitude where you just enjoy the
Yeah.
game, the land game, you just enjoy doing the due diligence, you just enjoy talking to the buyers and sellers, the
Yeah.
money just comes. I mean, I'm not chasing the money. I'm just enjoying the game, the land game, and just enjoying learning new facets of it, trying out new ways of slicing and dicing a deal. That's what motivates me.
That's incredible. I mean, you now live where you want to live. You don't need to live in the stateside where you're dealing with homes. You've crafted out what
Really?
you wanted, and it sounds like you are. And this is one of the things I think a lot of people who come into being a business owner or whatever it is, being very clear on where you want to be, and hearing
Yeah.
Colin what you're talking about is I really admire that you are very clear about what you want. You don't want to be tied to a certain amount of a business, and you want to
Is
have
it?
that freedom of time and location. I mean, another beautiful
Right?
thing is, I mean, this is really a laptop business. I
Yeah.
know people love that term, land investor, and then really, I kind of call this I sometimes call this a glorified e-commerce business where we're buying supply and,
Yeah.
we're reselling it. So it's
It is?
really, really cool to hear that. I want to ask you, were you at any time you were sitting on both sides of the fence thinking, maybe I'll
Yeah.
do land and houses? And how did that all
Yeah.
pan out?
I mean, and I did because I wouldn't encourage anybody to stop cold turkey at what's generating their current cash flow. I mean,
Yeah.
there has to be a transition. That's a very high risk strategy for me to just say I'm not buying any more houses as of today. I'm just doing land without having any proof of concept, without having a business that
Yeah.
provides enough cash flow. Because
Yeah.
realistically, it takes a year to
Hmm.
get momentum in any
Hmm.
business, even if you're lucky and the market's going your way. I mean, you send out a bunch of letters,
Yeah.
you get a deal under contract after maybe 2 months, maybe you
Yeah.
sell it after 5 months, you
Yeah.
fill up the pipeline for Q2 in the middle of Q1 and Q3 in the middle. I mean, it takes a while before you've got 5 deals every month. It
Right.
could take a year. So it would have been very risky to stop that. I was always encouraged at how quickly land got started, but I
Mm.
continued doing, I started flip. I toned it down because
Yeah.
but I was flipping one house a month
Mm.
in 2021 and
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
And then I'd already been doing land for about 18 months. So for about 18 months, I was doing land and houses. I was doing
Mm.
about one house a month and maybe 2 or 3 land deals a month, when things got up and running. And
Yeah.
then when the revenue from the land got high enough where I could say, okay, now I can stop doing the houses, then I'd move. And to be honest, the decision got easier because I started making much less money on the
Right.
houses. When you go from making 50 grand per house to 10 grand per house, and you already have land that's up and running, it wasn't a difficult decision to say, I'm just going to stop cold turkey. And it was easier because I didn't have a big business. I didn't
Yeah.
have a bunch of employees working full time on
Right.
land that I had to let go. I was
Right.
always, like I said, I split up with business partners three
Yeah.
years ago, but even we ran a very tight ship. There's just 3 of us with 3 employees.
Yeah.
So now it's just me and 2 VAs. So it's very flexible.
You
It's very
move.
dynamic.
Yes.
Uh,
Very, very nimbly team. It sounds like that's amazing.
yeah. And that's the way I like it. Some people might think it's not ambitious enough, but it's more than enough fun for me. And the last 2 years of land investing has just surpassed all my expectations, and it provided those important freedoms: financial, time, location during a
Yeah.
very disruptive period. COVID, splitting with business partners, relocating from Florida to Spain. I mean, without land, I would have really, really struggled.
I can't express how happy I am to hear where you've gotten. Like it really does sound like a dream come true, in just a matter of years. So, and by the way, everybody who's listening, honestly, I didn't even know Colin's story. I literally put out a message in our
You should.
community and said, "Hey, does anybody do houses?" And Colin was one of the two people who responded me. So, um, yeah, that's amazing, and that's one thing about the show is I'll bring on anybody, whether they're new or experienced. I think there's so much to learn from
Did
everybody
it?
in this space. Now, Colin, I also want to ask you. Um,
Hey,
there's a lot of people who may not be as successful in the housing. In fact, majority of people do not find success in houses.
yeah.
They don't have the luxury of having income come through like you do, and then you can sort of
Did it?
transition into houses. I'm sorry, into land.
Did it?
Do you sort of have any thoughts on that? I mean, they're already taking a risk with houses. Should they just go in and give it a shot for land if houses never worked out for them?
It's a fair question, and also like I don't want to give the impression that it was all just roses and I was just dancing along and waving $100 in the air the last 10 years. I mean, that clearly wasn't the case. There was a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of stress. There was there was deals where we lost money. There was a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you anybody, no matter what business you're getting into, no matter what level you're starting at, you need to develop resilience. You need to be a resilient person. It's more important than being smart. It's more important than being lucky.
So true.
You need to be able to just keep going when other people are going to give up. I mean, you need to develop that trait.
Yes.
Because everything is a roller coaster. I mean, you look at the last 2 years and you look at the summaries and the numbers all look great, but it doesn't tell the story of the weekly drama. Okay, but that aside, land is still very, very rewarding, and I would encourage people to look into it. And in terms of your question about if people didn't have lots of cap, I mean, one of the good thing about land is you don't need a lot of money, Jesse. I mean, I know people starting with a couple of $1,000 to their name. I mean,
that's exactly how I started in land myself.
You don't need to buy these properties. You can assign them. You can wholesale them. You can even find someone. You can even sell them with owner finance. Find someone else to be the owner finance guy.
Right.
So what's really important is that you, as soon as you can, start networking with people that are a little further down the road than you are, and start hanging around with people that are doing what you want to be doing and learning from them, and maybe doing some JVs on them. And just focus on one small area, like and if you had enough money for 3,000 letters, I would encourage people to send that send a letter to 1,000 people 3 times instead of 3,000 people once, because people need to be hit a couple of times before you get a deal. If you're just blasting one letter at a person once, your response rate is going to be rubbish. So if you have your budget, just slice it up so that you're able to touch people a few times. And before you send out those letters, get advice from people that have sent hundreds of thousands of letters and say, what do you think of this template? What do you think of the way I'm pricing it? What do you think of the way I'm offering this? Is this the right assignment agreement? Get the stuff in order. None of this stuff costs money. You can go to these, you can go to real estate meetings. You can go to a masterminds. You can join them for a couple of $100 a month. All that stuff is, I really only started becoming successful about 5 years ago financially. Before that, we were just tipping away, doing all right. And the trigger for me, the thing that switched from doing okay to doing well, was hanging around people that were smarter than me, people that were doing more deals than me, people that were, had made more mistakes than me,
tried different
and
things,
were willing to share their stories. And sometimes that's completely free, and sometimes you have to pay to get into a room. But it's always worth seeking that out, no matter what your situation is.
100%. Wow. Thanks. I hope you guys took some notes. Those of you guys are maybe on the fence. I think Colin mentioned a couple really, really key things there in terms of, mindset, also getting started and how to get started. I mean, you just talking about remailing a county. This is, or remailing a list. This doesn't get done often. And a lot of people, I see it, I certainly see it on the back end. A lot of people come in and out, which is unfortunate for those of us that are staying in, but there's a lot of people who just give up really quickly. So I appreciate you sharing that, Colin. I also want to throw you another question. What do you least miss most about? No, does that even make sense? What do you do not miss?
Least?
In the housing industry when you were doing fix and flips, what do you now never need to worry about? Now that you're in land.
One of the things that I miss the least is the process of selling like a renovated house and the headaches you can get from the inspection reports, or the buyers not liking the faucets you put in, or a couple of sockets not working, or some inspector that's busting your balls on the way your roof nails are hammered in, or way the hurricane straps are put in. I mean, that kind of stuff got very tiring, or just appraisals that came in low for no reason, even though there was loads of comps that supported it. Was just 10,000 under, and you're going to have to eat that. Or just, very needy investors that are like being extremely demanding, or ringing you up weeks and weeks after you sold the home saying, there's no hot water in this bathroom, and I bought the house from you 3 months ago. Can you come and fix it? That stuff used to really irritate me.
Right.
I don't miss that at all. Obviously, just permits and stuff like that are a real headache. On stuff happening under the ground and behind the walls that you could never have found out about, like a septic tank or a plumbing issue that just cost $5, $6, $10,000 that really ruins your profit margin. There's so many things that can catch you out that now you buy a piece of land, you sell a piece of land, you're giving the information that's available on public records, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I generally only talk to the people I'm buying land from once and talk to the people I'm selling land to once. And if you have a good closing agent, that's very easy to do. Before, there was multiple calls on both those sides, particularly on the resale side, but also on the buy side. So it's just a much easier transaction. There's far less moving parts. It's much smoother. It's literally just one conversation on each side and usually one email on each side. Say, hi everybody, here's a contract, looking forward to closing in 4 weeks time. And that, to me, after hundreds of headaches, it was just such a breath of fresh air, Jesse.
Now, I want to make sure our listeners know, Colin comes, it's relative, what's easy can be relative. And certainly Colin has gone through, working in the housing, and that's why it feels so much relatively easier for him. And as he mentioned, there are realities to running any business, and I never want to oversell how great land is. And I think just coming from Colin's perspective, I've always had a suspicion. I've talked to a few people, obviously, have come into houses and why they moved over. But yeah, I mean, so keep that in mind. But it makes me so happy to hear that, you've got a strong mindset about it. And not only that, the situation is so much easier for you as well. It's just, you couldn't ask for more, right, Colin? So
yeah, I mean, look, anybody can do it. You don't need to be an experienced single-family home flipper to get good at flipping land. Anybody can do it if you have an open mind, if you embrace networking, if you're an action taker, if you're a continuous learner. You can do it. Absolutely, anybody can do it. Doesn't matter. You can be an accountant, a plumber, an electrician, whatever you're doing.
Exactly.
But start land on the side first. Don't just stop your job and go and do land. You're going to have to work hard at both. Like, I had to work very hard to flip houses and build a land flipping business. They were long days and it got tiring, but you kind of have to do that. You have to have that transition before you move on to the next thing.
I know where you're coming from. I come from a design background. A designer has nothing to do with real estate. Same thing. Got into houses, made a lot of horrific mistakes. I've told my story on Instagram and social media before of how much I don't even want to think about it. But and then here comes land. And wait a minute, I wish I knew about this earlier. I really did. So, nonetheless, Colin, I want to go into what I call the quick fire round. I'd love to just kind of get to know you, and it's really cool that you now I know you live in Spain and all this other stuff. But I'd love to just sort of ask you some questions about you in general. So, outside of land, what do you like to do?
I like to keep fit. So I do a lot of exercise. I go to the gym 3 mornings a week. I love golfing with my friends. I love playing tennis with my friends. I like traveling back to Ireland regularly to visit my parents and my friends, and I like hanging out with our 2 kids, 13 and 11.
Oh, great.
And we take a lot of vacations. We take like 3-4 weeks off in the summers. We take a week off at Easter. We take a week off at Christmas. So we do a lot of. There's a lot to explore in Spain, if you like your food and your culture and your history and the sunshine. So I enjoy exploring Spain and getting back to the old country. And obviously I go back to Florida maybe 3 times a year, not because I need to look at a bunch of fields, because I don't, but it's just to obviously meet old buddies and more importantly, just to go to mastermind events and network with like-minded people. I get a real energy boost out of doing that stuff.
I can't stress the importance of being in a mastermind. Although I am very involved with land and land investors, I'm very involved in the software industry. So, I totally agree with you, Colin. Being in touch with people that are just a step ahead of you even will put you on a completely different trajectory. And so if you ever find yourself resisting to attend something or pay to attend something, get over that mindset because it will pay you back in spades. You also have to be careful of what you get hooped into too. I mean, that's what sort of happened to me when I got started first as a naive Canadian coming into the world of real estate in America. But yeah, for the most part, I think those things are so important. If you had one book to recommend that you've read recently, what would it be and why?
A book.
Or do you read? Or maybe it's a resource that
I do. I read. I read a lot. Sometimes I read just to forget about business because I'm just, my head's fried with business books.
Yeah.
But, and I'll give you an example of a great book I read that has I'll give you a couple of books. I'll give you some business books and I'll give you like a fiction book that's totally out there. It's called The Long Ships by Franz Bengtson. And it's about this crazy story in Western Europe in the 10th century about all the stuff the Vikings did around Europe, and it's just this hero story about a guy that came from a village and ended up being a real badass, and it's just a thoroughly enjoyable tale that you just won't want to put down. So that's, if you want to disconnect from the crazy world and your crazy family and your crazy business, The Long Ships by Franz Bengtson is a good one. And a couple of good business books, Mindset by Carol Dweck, and that's Dweck, is a really good one, and that's about having a growth mindset, because you have people with a fixed mindset who basically believe that their abilities are fixed, that whatever they're good at, and whatever they're not good at, they're not good at. Right. And they're obviously, as you and I know, they're much less likely to flourish than those with a growth mindset who believe that abilities to be developed. So that book is a real eye-opener about what your potential really is and how you can start exploiting it. So that was a really good business book. And one other one about just great little book about developing a kind of habits that will help you is Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. Yes. Which is maybe a better known book. That's a really good story. Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. So there's three for you.
Thank you. And I'm going to leave that in the show notes for you guys if you want to check those out. One bad habit that you're currently working on.
Drinking less alcohol.
All right, cutting back on the liquor. Got it. Awesome.
Yeah, cutting back on the liquor. That's definitely one bad habit that I've actually gotten really good at cutting back on it but only in the last 3 weeks. I met a guy at a last mastermind who really went from being an overweight 220-pound guy to a ripped 165-pound guy. And I'm like, what on earth did you do, Jeremiah? And he goes, I got this coach, virtual coach who helps out guys who own their own businesses in real estate, and he puts you on a nutrition and fitness plan. So I signed up for that about a month ago. Amazing. And I'm loving the change in my alertness, my energy, everything else. It's just like eating right, cutting down on the booze, getting smarter with exercise. So I used to eat a lot of candy as well. I have such a sweet tooth. We lived across the street. I live in a different place now because we moved like 2 months ago, but we lived across the street from a gas station that was just full of candy. And at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when I still had like 3 hours work left, I used to go and I'd just buy a bag of candy.
Get a sugar
so
rush.
Bad for you to do. That's fine every now and again, but I was doing it 3 or 4 days a week, and it's just a bad habit. And then like the whiskeys in the evenings, they're pretty harmless, but if you're doing them over months and months and months, it's just not good. It's not good long term. So those are two bad habits that I have been nipping in the bud over the last month, and so far so good.
A couple more questions here. What is your favorite show or movie you're watching or have watched recently?
I'm on season 4 of Succession.
I've heard about this.
Which is very enjoyable.
I heard.
So that's like about a media mag, like a Rupert Murdoch type guy, and his daughters and sons all fighting for a slice of the pie. That's quite good. I enjoy watching action movies with my 13-year-old son, so we watch all the Marvel stuff together.
Of course.
All that Iron Man, Ant-Man, all that kind of stuff. So I enjoy sitting on a comfy sofa with him, and we just like turn off the lights, put on a movie on a big screen. So I enjoy watching all that stuff with him. That's fun.
I love that. And if you would recommend one person to come on this podcast, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. If I could recommend one person. Huh.
You have to sit on that one?
I I mean, there's so many people in the mastermind I'm in. It's just incredible. I mean, I would get one of the guys that runs it, Leon Barnes, that is kind of number 2 at the Collective Genius Mastermind. He has access to so many amazing people, and he could tell you a lot of their stories, and he's got a great story himself. So I would get him on, and he hangs out with a lot of big hitters in the real estate and in the land game.
I will definitely I'll definitely look him. Is that Leon Barnes?
Leon, Leon Barnes, Barnes.
Awesome.
I can introduce you.
Would love that. Lastly here, you've been awesome on this interview, Colin. I genuinely, I mean, I don't usually go this long. we're got a lengthy time now. If somebody want to, I don't know how you interact with other investors, if you do, but where's the best way that somebody may, if you're open to sharing even maybe your social media profile or wherever they can sort of find you, what's sort of the best way?
Yeah, no, I'm very open to helping people. I mean, generally speaking, like I said, when you're learning from others is a great way. It works both ways. The more you help people, the more you generally get back as well. So I regularly ask for help for guys that are ahead of me, and I regularly give help to guys that are starting out, that are a rung or two below me. So I'm happy that. Easiest way, I mean, you can email me directly on Colin, which is COLIN at cgmland.com. That's Charlie Golf Mother Lands.com. And I'm on Facebook as well. You can find me. I think it's Colin Investment on Facebook. I mean, I'll get you the link. Maybe you can put it on the show notes. But people can hit me up.
I don't want
on
people
Facebook
to start hounding you. But I didn't expect you to share your email. But appreciate you doing that. Colin, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to get across on this episode here? You covered so much about your journey. I've genuinely enjoyed listening to your story here. But is there anything else that you'd like to share on this podcast?
We did cover a lot. That's true. I mean, I mentioned the importance of developing resilience. I think that's very good.
100%.
If people could get in the habit of tracking their income and expenses every month, they'd be doing themselves a big favor. It could be personally and just taking more interest in the income and expenses on their business. It could be your household, any rentals you have, your land business. If people spend like 3 hours a month just building and reviewing their balance sheets and their P&Ls, and again, these are all very learnable skills. You might think you're rubbish at numbers or rubbish at accountants, but you can teach yourself how to read a balance sheet, how to read a P&L, and I promise you'll be a lot more interested in them when they're your numbers. So just start that, no matter how modest your numbers are. Get into the habit of being on top of all that stuff now. Like even now, I track all of our household expenses. I know how much we spend on the schools, the electricity, the cable TV. I like seeing what's coming in and what's going out. So just doing that now and kind of maintaining it as a habit will you'll be doing yourself a huge favor.
I love it. Colin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being so open to sharing your journey and your thoughts, especially coming from the housing side of things. Would love to have you back on the show in the future, but Colin, thanks again for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Jesse. My pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong.